Welcome to the ultimate theme park story showdown. In this corner, weighing in with a decade of magic, an undisputed king of nostalgia, Walt Disney World Resort. And in the opposing corner, the new kid on the block, packed with cinematic thrills and cutting-edge technology, Universal Orlando Resort. And last but certainly not least, the original contender that started them all, Disneyland Resort. Tonight, these titans of themed entertainment will clash not on ride compliment, but on storylines. Who will emerge victorious? It's time to rumble. If you've watched any of my other theme park storytelling videos, and if you haven't, link below, you'll know that I like to break down theme park attractions into 3 categories: exploration stories, survival stories, and mission stories. And with these categories, we're going to determine who has the best storylines. We're going to find the top 3 candidates in each category and which resort they come from. And finally, we'll tally the results. Which resort is going to come up on top? Let's find out. Beginning with exploration stories. Now, in case you don't remember, exploration attractions are attractions that don't tend to have a defined conflict. It's more about soaking in the scenery, the theming, the atmosphere, etc. So think about what your top 3 exploration attractions will be, and we'll begin with my number 3, which is Storybook Land Canal Boats. It might surprise you to see an attraction like this so high on the list, but I think there's a lot about Storybook Land Canal Boats that makes for interesting storytelling. For one, the opening portal into Storybook Land through Monstro's mouth is really clever. It does create a little bit of quasi-tension where you're going through the mouth of an ominous character to reach a beautiful land. Nice contrast. Now, once you reach the beautiful land, you're going to find the miniature villages of Disney animated characters across films. And there's something delightful about the idea that all of these characters inhabit the same space. This is very much like the Pixar theory before the Pixar theory. All of the animated characters just live in these little kingdoms all next to each other. What a fun idea. Now, if there's something that could be improved upon, I would say the ride just sort of ends. While we do have the interesting beginning with Monstro, there is no interesting portal back. And that's a disconnect, a little bit of a miss there. Let's move on to attraction number 2, the Enchanted Tiki Room. The brilliance of the story of this attraction is to get you to believe such a strange and complicated concept, and you do just sort of buy into it. I remember hearing from the Sherman brothers that they were brought in to watch a demo of the Tiki Room where, the birds sang and the flowers and the Tiki gods, and they're like, this is great, but what in the world is this? And Walt Disney turned to them and said something to the effect of, I have no idea, but you're going to explain it in the opening song. Just the concept of a Tiki Room. It's world building. A Tiki Room is a place where flowers sing and Tiki gods drum, and there's a magic fountain, and they just keep bringing up all these different concepts, and we go with it because there's an authenticity to the script, and there's such great placemaking through the attraction. The attraction even manages some great musical tension towards the end where everything builds up in the Hawaiian war chant and it gets bigger and bigger, and the water fountain goes up and it gets bigger, and then it finally culminates in a thunder crash and the gods are angered and we need to get you out and all of these things. But it's not played up as some sort of ridiculous over-the-top survival story. It's just a nice little ending. It's a nice little crescendo. But it does mean that the whole thing mattered. At least it mattered to the gods, who were apparently angered by the celebrating, right? So our show actually had an impact on that world. And I think that gives it a little extra oomph, a little bit extra importance. Number 1 is the Hogwarts Express. Shocker, right? You probably weren't expecting to see Universal at number 1 for exploration. I certainly didn't. When I was going to this list, I'd completely forgotten that this was an exploration attraction. But it really is. We're never in any danger. There really isn't a specific mission unless you think the mission is to get to your destination. But I don't really think of it that way. It really is a let's explore the Wizarding World story. And it does it brilliantly. All the touches, from the fact that the entrance of the attraction doesn't look anything like the magical world we're going to explore, which we end up exploring by going through a brick wall, through a fun little visual effect, to the gorgeous, stunning ride vehicles that pull us into the story, to the fact that there's a nice arc of vignettes that take place on the attraction that build and get stronger and reach a fever pitch when you finally get to Hogwarts. Not only that, but it's an attraction with its own sequel where you can ride from Hogsmeade to Diagon Alley and get a whole other set of characters to interact with. This so easily could have gone wrong in many directions. It could have been boring, or it could have been overly frantic, and they managed to hit it perfectly. It is, in my mind, the perfect encapsulation of what exploring the world of a movie could look like. Alright, so we begin with more or less the tie. We have one for Universal Orlando, one for Walt Disney World, because they have the Enchanted Tiki Room as well, so I'll count it. And Disneyland gets Enchanted Tiki Room and Storybook Land Canal Boat, so a little bit of a lead, but not much. Let's move on to survival. Survival stories are similar to exploration stories in that the guests are out sightseeing. However, in these stories, something goes wrong, and the guests are thrust into some adventure, often a life-threatening one. In number 3, we have Star Tours. This is really very similar to the Hogwarts Express, although unlike the Hogwarts Express, Star Tours does put you in direct danger. You're in the line of fire. But there are a few things that make it great beyond just a lot of great action sequences, and of course in the current version, there's the fun randomness where you never quite know what you're going to get, which can make for an interesting storytelling experience because it introduces the concept of the unexpected, which is great, particularly for a film-based attraction, also for an attraction that isn't super intense. Probably my favorite storytelling aspect about this attraction is the reluctant pilot. Now, originally, you had Rex, who it was his first flight. He was a rookie. He wasn't quite sure of the controls, and so you're just at the mercy of him and going along with him, and you kind of level up with him on this grand adventure. In the sequel version, the current version, C-3PO is now the captain, but in a similar circumstance. He's not prepared for the situation. He really wasn't supposed to be the pilot. He kind of accidentally ended up here, and so again, we level up with him. Now, I will say something about Star Tours The Adventures Continues, which is that depending on which flow you get, the story can be better or worse, and that is a negative aspect of the randomness of it. Particularly, I find some of the third segment planets stronger than others to create a climax. But no matter what, the story does give a fairly strong beginning, middle, and end, and there is a progression where the planets at the end are a little bit more exciting than the planets at the beginning. Second place might be a little bit of a surprise. Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. Honestly, it's on here for a few different reasons, but one of the biggest reasons is it's an attraction where you don't even survive. What a weird ending, and what a creative ending, and how did they get away with that again? But beyond the interesting ending, which they couldn't even speak about on television back in 1955, it is a well-encapsulated little ride. You have the entrance where you're entering Toad Hall, you start going around the house, and then it starts to level up where you're around the countryside, and then it gets even further, or you blow yourself up with dynamite, and then you end up going to court, and then you end up with that climactic train track scene, which is a really compelling storytelling moment of any theme park attraction, and has been mimicked many, many times. And yeah, that ending, it's a banger. One of the biggest plot twists in theme park history. Is it the biggest? I don't know, it sounds like another video, doesn't it? Comment below if you'd like to see that. The number 1 survival attraction is probably not going to surprise anyone. The Haunted Mansion. Now, I know a lot of people argue about how much storytelling the Haunted Mansion even has, but in my opinion, from my framing, it's a terrific story. We enter what looks like a seemingly normal-looking mansion. We find out that it is haunted. The house traps us, and it gets more and more and more interesting until finally we escape, except, hitchhiking ghosts. They're going to haunt us until we return, so we're not going to fully escape. Quite the ending. And it's also clever if you think about how it progresses throughout the attraction. At first, we can just see the impact of the ghosts on objects. We see moving candles and moving coffins, and we can't actually see the ghosts themselves. Then we start to see them transparently inside the ballroom. And then finally, we see their full corporeal form in the graveyard, and it becomes this grandiose celebration. And as it goes, it also becomes less ominous. It starts out really creepy and threatening, and as we learn more about these ghosts, as we become more familiar with them, it starts to become more comical and silly and fun. And then it does that 180 at the end where it gets creepy again, where yes, they will haunt you until you return, and hurry back. It's just brilliant, honestly. You just compare it to any haunted attraction across the world, it stands out because of this natural progression, and it's not heavy-handed in its narration. A lot of people don't even realize what the attraction is doing, but it's there, the storytelling is there, and it is strong, and it is a reason why it has stood the test of time. Let's move on to mission stories. It's probably the most predictable top 3, although order will vary, and I'm sure some of you will disagree. In number 3, I have Rise of Resistance. Now, I know a lot of people would have this attraction higher, but in my opinion, the reason why this attraction might be higher is more to do with the spectacle of the special effects than the story itself. The story itself is very strong. You are tasked to be part of the resistance. You learn that it's important that the First Order doesn't know the whereabouts of the hidden base. You get captured by the First Order, which might be a bit unexpected the first time you go on it. You're going to get interrogated, and then you break out, and you end up on this exciting journey, escaping and blowing up the Star Destroyer. Great, isn't it? So why isn't this like number 1? What holds it back? There are 2 things that I think hold this back from being quite as strong in my opinion. One is the mentor character, who Admiral Beck. I had to think about that for a second. He's okay, but he's not that strong of a character. He's not that quotable. He's not that likable exactly. He's fine. About the only sort of humanizing moment is when he says, who hired these droids anyway? Or something to that effect. I can't even remember the line exactly, and I'm the kind of person who can quote dialogue exact. But I think that's the thing. There's a lot of serviceable dialogue, exposition-heavy dialogue. There just aren't a lot of classic lines. And the other thing that I think is a little bit weaker is ultimately our job is to just not tell the First Order about where the base is, which I've never found to be a really great hook. I've always wondered what happens if you just start screaming in the halls and breaking character. Not that I recommend anybody do that. But, as soon as you're told to do something, you kind of not want to do it, which actually will bring us to something else on this list. Moving on to number 2, we have the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror. This attraction benefits from having a built-in narrator already, Rod Serling, although in this case voiced by Mark Silverman, who does a brilliant job of channeling Rod Serling. And yeah, it's how can you beat that narrator voice? How can you beat that style of narration? We're immediately brought into the story. The story is interesting. There's a mystery involved. And I do think that the way that the attraction ride vehicle ties into the story is super clever. The idea of trying to take something that you're going to encounter on a regular basis, like an elevator, and make it creepy in the way that the Twilight Zone would make things creepy, it's really top notch. And the pacing of the attraction is clever in how it toys with you, because eventually you're going to have that big drop. So it draws it out on purpose, and it's really effective. If there is a negative similar to Rise of Resistance, I'm not sure if our role in the story is defined quite enough. We're asked to find out what happened to the people on that Halloween night, but besides just curiosity, we're not really given a reason in the story to want to do that. It would be helpful in a way if there was some motivation to find out, or some reward or something. Why are we doing this? So that makes it a little bit weaker than the number 1 example. Indiana Jones Adventure. This might be a little bit expected or easy or whatever, but yeah, this is a really, really strong story. All the way in the queue, we're beginning to get details about this god and what it's offering, and you see ominous signs of some of the different things that are going to be facing. You constantly see paintings of the god with its eyes closed, and there's this whole setup of we're going inside the temple to get earthly riches or the fountain of youth or future knowledge, but you can't look into the eyes of the idol. It's just really super clever because you know that theme park guests, of course, are going to do it. And the fact that we are ultimately responsible for all the terrible things that happen makes it all the more enjoyable, doesn't it? Especially when Indiana Jones gets to insult you, tourists, you had to look, didn't you? Why they send me tourists? It's fun. And beyond that, the ride is so cleverly designed from a storytelling standpoint. Start with a very tight shot on Mara. We turn towards a spotlighted image of Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones ushers us away, and then the room opens up to this huge show scene of the camera bubbling dust, which is just a jaw dropper the first time you see it. And then you cut into these little corners and encounter a bunch of different obstacles, from skeletons to bugs to a snake. And then the whole attraction tightens again, and it gets very claustrophobic until it culminates in that iconic rolling boulder. It's just so smart in how it keeps amping up the scenes to the fact that that big climactic show scene of the rolling boulder is in fact a great climactic show scene. And it doesn't have to use a big thrill in order to get that across. It is the ultimate obstacle to face off of. When you get to the end of that attraction, you're like, I did it. I survived. And then you encounter Indiana Jones, who generally tells you something to the effect of, you did a pretty good job, I guess. And that's about as good as you're going to get from Indiana Jones. He stays in character. It isn't overly cutesy, but it does make you feel accomplished. All right, so that being said, if you've been doing some math, you can see this was quite a victory for Disneyland Resort, which got 7 out of the 9. I didn't really expect it going into this, to be honest. I made this video and I had this idea and I was like, I'm curious who will win. And it just steamrolled everybody else. Although Walt Disney World did end up with 5 out of the 9. Poor Universal's in last place with only 1. Now, Universal fans might be crying foul. You might be asking about things like, well, where is Spider-Man? Where is Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey? Where is Harry Potter and the Escape from Gringotts? And all these are great attractions, but I just don't think storytelling-wise they're as strong. And, maybe that's something that I could cover at another time. By the way, if you agreed or not, let me know. And like and subscribe, hit the bell. It helps the algo. You know what you're doing. So there you have it. And if you disagreed with my choices, I would love to know what you think. And I'd love to have that conversation. It's always fun talking about theme park stories. As you can see, I've got a lot of energy. I love this subject and I will be talking about it more in the future. But in the meantime, if you haven't checked out all of my other videos, there's some other ones about theme parks, and I'll see you around.